All right, diving deep today, we're looking at qualitative research methods. You shared a slide deck from a course on this, and I'm really curious, what is this approach all about? How's it different from the quantitative research I'm used to? What are the good and bad parts?
Well, imagine trying to understand, what it's really like to live with a chronic illness or go through unemployment. Numbers can only tell us so much.
Yeah, for sure. I guess not. So it's all about understanding those lived experiences, like the why behind the what's right.
Exactly. Yeah. Imagine trying to understand the meaning people find in their experiences, how they see the world. That's where qualitative research shines.
Okay, I'm starting to get it. But what even counts as data here? It's not like we're doing math, right?
Right. Think more like transcripts from interviews, focus groups, even stuff like diaries, essays, or stories people share.
Okay.
And don't forget media things like radio, TV shows, even online stuff can be analyzed this way too.
Huh. So it's way more diverse than I thought.
Yeah.
The analysis must be pretty different too.
Absolutely. We'll be looking at two common methods, thematic analysis and IPA, interpretative phenomenological analysis.
Okay.
Thematic analysis basically looks for common themes across different experiences, while IPA tries to understand the meaning-making process within each unique experience.
Both sound interesting.
Yeah.
But before we get too deep, what are the downsides?
Well, one thing to remember is that the goal here isn't to generalize the findings to a larger population.
So we're not saying this applies to everyone, just this is what we found in this specific context.
Exactly.
Makes sense. Anything else to watch out for?
Yeah, well, this type of research is really dependent on the researcher, their skills and interpretation.
Yeah.
It's definitely not a quick process either. Analyzing all that rich data takes time.
Not about speed then. It's about understanding the nuances.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm ready to go deeper. Let's break down these ideas and see what we find.
All right, let's start by acknowledging that qualitative research is all about embracing the complexity of human experience. It recognizes that experience can't be reduced to simple categories or variables.
Right, seeing all the shades of gray, not just black and white.
Right.
So instead of those massive data sets, qualitative research often works with smaller groups, right?
Exactly. And how those participants are chosen matters. They're selected because they fit the research question.
It's about getting the right people, not just a lot of random people.
Yeah, it's about quality over quantity.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
So how is quality defined in this kind of research? What are we even looking for?
Well, think of it this way. We're trying to understand how individuals make sense of the world, how they experience things. It delves into the quality of their experiences, all those little things. Numbers can't show language, and how people talk plays a big role here.
Interesting. So instead of measuring what people do, it's about understanding the meaning behind it.
Exactly. We look at how people use language to shape their understanding of the world.
Wow. So we're not just watching what they do, but trying to understand the thoughts and motivations behind their actions.
Right. And to get at that meaning, qualitative researchers use all sorts of data sources. Remember those examples we talked about earlier? It's a ton of human expression just waiting to be understood.
Right. Interviews, focus groups, personal stories, even media. It seems like researchers cast a wide net. But how do they make sense of all this different data?
Right. It's not about putting numbers in a spreadsheet. There are a lot of different tools and techniques, but we'll focus on two: thematic analysis and interpretive phenomenological analysis, or IPA.
Okay, I'm ready to dive into those methods. Let's start with thematic analysis. What is that all about?
Imagine looking through a big pile of pebbles, trying to find similar ones, looking for patterns. That's kind of what thematic analysis is like. It's a way to identify themes or patterns of meaning within all the data.
So you're looking for the things that connect different people's experiences, how they understand their world.
Yeah, trying to uncover shared perspectives or beliefs.
Sounds insightful. But what about those unique individual experiences? How do we capture that? That's where IPA comes in, right?
Exactly. IPA digs deeper, focusing on understanding the unique experience of each person.
So instead of looking for things in common across a group, we're zooming in on each person's perspective.
Exactly. We're trying to understand each person's meaning-making process, how they experience and understand the world around them, really getting into the specifics of their experience.
Wow. Both of these methods sound important. I'm already seeing how they offer different but equally valuable insights.
They really do. One of the best things about these qualitative approaches is how deep and rich the data is. Instead of just numbers, we get these detailed narratives and stories that really show us what those experiences are like.
It's like seeing a whole painting instead of just the outline. It sounds like this approach is all about understanding the why behind human behavior, not just measuring the what.
That's it. Qualitative research goes past those surface-level observations to look at the meanings and motivations that drive behavior.
This makes me think about those limitations we talked about earlier. Even though it's so detailed, it's hard to apply the findings to everyone.
That's important to remember. The goal isn't to make broad statements. It's about deeply understanding a specific thing within a specific context.
So it's not, this is how everyone thinks or feels, but this is how these people in this specific situation understand this thing.
Exactly. It's about understanding the complexity of human experience, not making broad statements.
I see the value in that. It's a different way of approaching knowledge.
It is, and a valuable one. Which brings us to another point we mentioned earlier, the researcher. Their skills and perspective seem to play a bigger role here compared to quantitative approaches.
Right. It's almost like they become part of the research process.
In some ways, yes. Qualitative research really depends on the researcher's ability to understand and analyze the data. It takes a lot of skill and a deep understanding of human experience.
Seems like it takes a special kind of person to do this well.
It does.
Yeah.
And they need to be careful and thoughtful through the whole research process.
This has been really helpful. We've covered so much already, from the basics of qualitative research to its strengths and weaknesses. And we even touched on those data analysis methods. I'm excited to delve deeper into thematic analysis and IPA, but let's take a break and pick up where we left off in the next part of our deep dive. Okay, I'm ready to dig into those analysis methods we talked about before. Let's start with thematic analysis. It sounds like we're trying to find those common threads in all the data, right?
Right. Imagine you have a stack of interview transcripts. You start by getting really familiar with them, reading them over and over, almost like getting a feel for the landscape.
Immersing yourself in the data.
Yeah. And as you're doing that, you start to notice some things popping up. Maybe you see several people talking about how important social support is, or they describe an emotion in a similar way.
Those initial sparks.
Yeah. Then you start coding the data. You basically give labels to different parts of the text that match those themes.
Like using color coding to organize your notes.
Exactly. And as you code more and more, you might change some themes or find new ones.
Always adjusting as you go.
Exactly. And a back and forth process. Once you've coded everything, you start grouping those codes into bigger themes to see the overall picture.
Building a map of the key themes, kind of.
Exactly. And the last step is to define and name each theme, really capturing what they represent.
It's a whole process of discovery, huh?
It is. And it takes a lot of careful thought. You really have to let the data guide you.
Now, thinking about IPA, it focuses on the individual, right?
Mm-hmm.
How is that different from thematic analysis?
So thematic analysis looks for common themes across everyone, but IPA takes a different approach. It's about going deep into one person's world, trying to see things from their point of view.
Trying to understand their reality.
Yes. IPA is all about understanding that individual experience. Instead of shared patterns, we're trying to see how each person understands the world uniquely.
Sounds really insightful.
Yeah.
What are some of the key things you do in IPA?
Well, first, we really dive into their story. We read and reread what they've shared, whether it's an interview or a written story. We're trying to fully immerse ourselves in their world.
To see things through their eyes.
Exactly. And as we do that, we start taking notes, writing down our initial thoughts and impressions.
So you're actively responding to their story.
It is like a conversation in a way. Then we go back and examine those initial reactions. What stood out? What emotions came up? What connections did we make? We're basically trying to understand our own response to their story.
That's fascinating. Using your own experience to understand someone else's. But how do you stay objective?
That's where the method really matters. As we look closer, we start to see themes or patterns within their story. Maybe they use certain metaphors a lot, or there are key events or relationships that stand out.
Looking for the things that connect their experiences.
Yeah. Then we look at how those themes connect and try to build a complete picture of their experience.
Seems like it takes a lot of attention to detail. And I imagine it'd be easy to misinterpret things.
Definitely. That's why it's so important to be aware of our own biases and how they might be affecting our understanding.
Trying to be as objective as possible.
Right. And the final step is to write a detailed description of their experience, combining their story with our analysis.
Combining storytelling with deep understanding.
That's a great way to put it. The goal is to show that person's world in all its detail, to help us understand their unique experience.
Both thematic analysis and IPA seem really useful. Are there times when one might be better than the other?
It depends on what you're trying to learn and the kind of data you have. It's about choosing the right tool for the job.
Not about one being better, but about what fits best. So what are some things to consider when choosing?
Well, if you want to understand shared experiences or see if there are common themes across a group of people, thematic analysis might be best.
Looking for those common threads. What about IPA?
IPA is great when you really want to get into the specifics of one person's experience, to understand how they see the world. It lets you go deeper into that person's individual reality than thematic analysis can.
So thematic analysis for breadth, IPA for depth.
Exactly. It's all about using the approach that best gets you the information you need.
This has been so helpful. I feel like we've really gotten a grasp on these methods. But what does all this mean for us outside of research? How can we use these ideas to better understand research in our everyday lives?
It's a great question, and it matters more than ever these days. We're always getting hit with information from everywhere. Being able to really understand the research behind it is so important.
I agree. It's easy to just accept what we hear without thinking about it. So how can understanding qualitative research help us be smarter about information?
One key thing is knowing that not all research is the same. Understanding the good and bad of different approaches can help us make sense of it all.
So it's like having tools to evaluate research. What are some of the things we should look out for?
When you see research findings in an article, a journal, or even online, think about the methods they used. Was it qualitative or quantitative? What was the data? How did they analyze it?
Really digging into how they got those findings.
Right. By understanding the methodology, you can start to see what the findings can and can't tell us. Remember, qualitative research is great for in-depth understanding, but it doesn't necessarily apply to everyone.
So just because one group of people experience something in a specific way, it doesn't mean everyone in that group will.
Exactly. We have to be careful not to overgeneralize. On the other hand, quantitative research is good for seeing trends, but it might miss the details of individual experiences.
Like two different ways of seeing the world.
Exactly. And by knowing how they work, we can get a more balanced view.
It sounds like the key is to be aware of those different approaches and use them the right way. It's been really eye-opening. We've learned that qualitative research is powerful for understanding human experiences, but it also takes a lot of careful thought and a bit of healthy skepticism.
I couldn't agree more. As people who read and hear about research, we need to engage thoughtfully, think critically, and understand the limits of each approach.
This deep dive has given me new ways to think about the research I see. Now, listener, we want to hear from you. What are your takeaways from this? What questions do you have? We hope that you'll approach research findings with more curiosity and awareness. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into qualitative research. Okay, back again. We've been exploring this world of qualitative research, and now I'm thinking, how do we actually use this, like out in the real world? We've talked about all these methods, but what does it mean for us day to day? How can we better understand the research we see everywhere?
Such a good question. And it's super relevant today. We're just flooded with information constantly. Being able to really look at the research behind it all, that's crucial.
Yeah, for sure. It's way too easy to just accept whatever we read or hear without really thinking about it.
Yeah.
How can understanding this qualitative stuff help us with that?
Well, it comes down to this. Not all research is made the same. Knowing the good and bad of different approaches, that can really help us navigate this whole world of information.
So it's like having tools to judge research claims. What tools should we be using?
Whenever you see research, in an article, a journal, online, pause for a second. Think about how they did it. Was it qualitative? Quantitative? Where did the data come from? How did they analyze it?
Like we're looking under the hood to see how it all works.
Exactly. That helps you see the strengths and weaknesses of what they found. Remember, qualitative research is great for deep understanding, but it doesn't mean it applies to everyone.
So just because they find something in a specific group, it doesn't mean it's true for the whole group.
Right. It's important not to overgeneralize. On the other hand, quantitative research that can be good for spotting trends, but it might miss the details of individual experiences.
Like two different ways of looking at things.
Totally. Knowing how each approach works, that helps us get a more balanced view.
So it's about using the right lens for the situation. This has been amazing. We've learned so much that qualitative research can really help us understand human experience, to see the why behind things. But it also takes careful thinking and a healthy dose of questioning things.
Couldn't have said it better. It's on us, to really engage with the research we see, to think critically about it, and to understand the limits of each approach.
I feel like we've got a whole new way of looking at research now. And listener, we want to hear from you. What are your takeaways? What questions are you left with? We hope you'll look at research findings with fresh eyes, with more curiosity, and that critical awareness. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of qualitative research.